Hey guys, what we're going to do is look at section 2 of chapter 5. Chapter 5 is all about Congress. If you remember from section 1, we talked about it's like a general overview, the structure of Congress, how it's bicameral, how many people are in the House, how many people are in the Senate, how it's based on population in the House, like I said, bicameral legislature. Then we talked about checks and balances, what can Congress do to the other two branches. What we're going to be getting into now is the powers of Congress. There are a lot of different powers. And with your assignment from earlier in the week outlining this section, there's just so many different types of powers that can be confusing. We have expressed powers, which are also called delegated, which are also called enumerated powers. Those are spelled out in the Constitution. They are specifically listed in the Constitution, expressed, written down. We have implied powers. Implied powers are not written down, but they are implied. They are part of, or they are a derivative of the expressed powers. It's because of the necessary and proper clause, and we'll get to that in just a few minutes. We have inherent powers. Inherent powers I like to call just because powers. Inherent powers gives the federal government the authority to do things simply because they are the federal government or they are the national government, like talking with other countries. Well, you would say the national government should be able to talk with other governments. Isn't that just like a natural thing that governments do? That would be inherent. We also have concurrent powers, denied powers, reserved powers, all sorts of things. And that's why we're almost doubling down on Section 2 by outlining it and then by going over it here. Now, let's look at some expressed powers. What I have here, what I've done is I've kind of categorized it. We have financing powers, so powers that deal with money. Congress has the power to lay and collect taxes. They have the power to borrow money as well. There's a commerce power, so trade. Congress has the power to regulate interstate commerce, which interstate means between the states or among the states. Just like interstate highways go from coast to coast, I-70 goes, you can actually take I-70 all the way to Pennsylvania. And then you can also take I-70 all the way to Colorado and more. They cross the states, interstate. And only Congress has the power to pass laws that dictate or control or affect economic activity that crosses state lines. They have military powers or defense powers. Congress has the power to declare war. They have the power to raise and maintain an army and navy and finance an army and navy. And then they have other national powers, coin money, establish copyrights and patents. They can establish bankruptcy laws. How do you become a U.S. citizen? These are all expressed powers, and we're going to get to those, I believe, right now. So in Article 1, it's Section 8 of the Constitution. Article 1, Section 8 lists the powers of Congress, and it's literally a list. Congress shall have the power to, number 1, levy taxes. 2, to borrow money. 3, to regulate interstate commerce. 4, to establish uniform rules of citizenship. So how do you become a U.S. citizen if you're not born here? That's number 4. Number 5, to coin money. To set uniform weights and measures. 6, to punish counterfeiters. 7, to establish post offices. 8, to make copyright and patent laws. Like if you invent something, you want to patent it so no one else can make money off your invention. It's through the federal government. Congress has set up laws regulating it. If you write a book or write a song or a poem and you want to copyright it so no one can use that book, that song, that poem without your permission, you get issued a copyright. Number 9, to establish courts. Now, Article 3 of the Constitution, which is the judicial branch, which we will get to in February or so, is really brief. And Article 3 of the Constitution says Congress shall have the judicial branch or the judicial power, shall be vested in a Supreme Court and other courts, other inferior courts, as Congress may prescribe and enact. So number 9, Congress has the power to create courts other than the Supreme Court. Number 10 is kind of neat. They have the power to punish pirates. Number 11, to declare war, to raise and support an army, to raise and maintain a navy, to establish military laws, so rules and regulations for the Army and Navy. The federal government has the power to call up the militia. They have the right to organize the militia. They have the right to, they have jurisdiction over the District of Columbia. Now, the District of Columbia is not a state. It's in between Maryland and Virginia, but it's a district. Washington, D.C., District of Columbia. And Congress has jurisdiction over that land. It's about I can't remember if it's a 10 square mile chunk of land, maybe a little bit more. But that's the District of Columbia. And Washington, the capital of the United States, sits in the District of Columbia. Number 18 is a biggie. It is a biggie. They saved the big one for last. And it says to make all laws necessary and proper to the execution of any other expressed powers. This gives Congress their implied powers. Congress has the power to make other laws that aren't mentioned in 1 through 17. If it's necessary and proper, then they can do that. Well, think about that. Necessary and proper. That's kind of vague. If I were to say, do what's necessary to get an A in this class, think about that. Do whatever is necessary to make an A. That's going to be open to interpretation. Some of us may study really hard and read the textbook and watch my videos 5 or 6 times, but others may try to hack into the computer system and change their grade to an A. Or they may use a cheat sheet or something else. But necessary and proper, that's a vague term that's open to quite a bit of interpretation. And Congress has used the necessary and proper clause. Sometimes people call it the elastic clause. Think about that elastic. It stretches. And the elastic clause stretches Congress's power. But this is a biggie, and they've used this a lot to do things that they normally wouldn't be able to do. But they claimed it's been necessary to do it in order to carry out one of the other 17 things. Now, with these implied powers, there's something I want to look at. There's 2 different ways of looking at the powers of Congress. And it's a way of, there are 2 ways of interpreting the Constitution. We have a loose constructionist and a strict constructionist. And it's just 2 different ways of looking at the Constitution. A strict constructionist, it's black and white. It's Congress can only do things that are explicitly, specifically listed in the Constitution. If it doesn't say they can do it, then they can't do it. They are strict. Just like, if you have strict parents and they say, be home at 9, what do? You're home at 9. Not 9:01, not 9:15. It's 9. It's black and white with them. And those were anti-federalists. They were wanting to make sure Congress didn't become too powerful. And then we have loose constructionists. Loose constructionists believe that the Constitution is open to interpretation, that it can mean different things to different people at different times, and that Congress needs to have the freedom to, they need some wiggle room, because they may need to do something that isn't mentioned in the Constitution, but they kind of need to do it. For instance, I'll give you just an example of an implied power. Congress has the power to lay and collect taxes. That's true. That's an expressed power. Well, Congress created the IRS, and they created a national bank to handle that. Now, nowhere in the Constitution does it say Congress can create the IRS or Congress can have a national bank. But it's kind of implied that if they have the power to raise money, that they're going to need a bank and they're going to need a system, the IRS, to do the collections. Loose constructionists favor that wide open view. Strict constructionists say, if it's not listed in the Constitution, you can't do it. We're going to talk more about loose constructionism and strict constructionism when we get to the court system, because judges have that philosophy. Some judges are strict constructionists. It's black and white. If the Constitution says yes, we can. If the Constitution doesn't mention it, you can't. And then we have loose constructionists, which it's open to interpretation, that they acknowledge that the times change, and so the Constitution can adapt to our situation. There's other powers that Congress has that aren't necessarily related to lawmaking. They have the power to propose constitutional amendments, which then get passed on to state conventions or state legislatures to be ratified. They have the power to conduct investigations. So if Congress believes the executive branch or someone in the executive branch did something wrong, they have the power to investigate. They can issue subpoenas, which say you will show up to court. You will show up to our committee hearing, this investigation, and you will have to testify. There's some powers that only apply to the House. The House chooses the president if no president gets a majority of votes in the Electoral College. So if no president gets 270 votes, then the House of Representatives gets to decide. And we'll talk more about that when we talk specifically about the House. Another power of the House, they are the only ones that can talk about revenue, that can introduce legislation about taxes. They have the power to start impeachment proceedings. The Senate has powers specifically to them. They choose the vice president if no one gets a majority of electoral votes. They give advice and consent. They approve presidential appointments, and they approve treaties negotiated by the president. So these are powers that they have, but they aren't legislative powers. These are other powers. We have denied powers as well. Denied powers, they limit Congress. In the Constitution, Article 1, Section 9 says, Congress, you cannot do these things. So they are denied. Nope, can't do it. One of them is they can't suspend the writ of habeas corpus. The writ of habeas corpus is an order or is the guarantee that you have a right to be brought before a judge. If you get arrested, you have the right to stand before a judge. The government must put your body, habeas corpus, show me the body is what it means. You have a right to go before a judge, an impartial judge, and they will determine whether or not it warrants you staying in jail. And so Congress can't suspend it. Congress can't just say, we're suspending the writ of habeas corpus and we're just going to put people in jail and leave them there. Can't do that. Congress can't pass a bill of attainder. A bill of attainder is a law that declares someone or a group of people guilty without a trial. So Congress can't do this. Congress can't pass a law saying Mr. Schoenhardt is guilty of tax fraud and he's sentenced to 10 years in prison. And Congress passes it, the president signs it. They can't do that. It's a bill of attainder, and it's specifically denied in the Constitution. And the Constitution forbids Congress from passing an ex post facto law. Ex post facto is a Latin phrase. It means after the fact. Congress can't criminalize something today that was legal in the past and charge you for what you did in the past. Let me give you a real simple example. We know the speed limit on Highway 67 in front of the high school is 60 miles an hour. Let's say Bonne Terre changes that speed limit, or the state changes that speed limit to 50 miles an hour. And let's say it's 60 miles an hour on Monday. And you're driving down Highway 67. We're all going 60 miles an hour because we don't speed, because we're all good boys and girls. Tuesday, the law is passed that reduces it to 50 miles an hour. And on Wednesday, a police officer can't knock on your door and say, hey, On Monday, you were driving 60 miles an hour on Highway 67. Well, the speed limit is now 50 miles an hour. So I'm going to write you a ticket for speeding on Monday. You can't do that. You can't criminalize something that was legal in the past and then charge someone with that crime. You can't make it illegal after the fact. And that's an ex post facto law. And that's a denied power. So there are things in the Constitution that are specifically listed that says, Congress, you cannot do these things. That's it. That is a lot of different powers, especially with the expressed powers, that long list, 1 through 18. Then we have implied powers. We're talking more about implied powers when we get into Congress a little bit more. But the implied powers is big. It really is. It allows Congress, just think about anything. Obamacare. Where in the Constitution does it say Congress has the power to set up health insurance plans? Nowhere. But it's been used. The Interstate Commerce Clause has been used. The Necessary and Proper Clause has been used to do this. Where in the world, let's think of another example. Where in the world does it say in the Constitution that we can have the Congress can have a national minimum wage? Where does it say that? It's not in there. It doesn't say Congress can establish a minimum wage. But you know what they did? They used the implied powers. They said, well, a business, a factory in Missouri may make stuff and send their product to Illinois. That's interstate commerce. We have the power to regulate interstate commerce, and which means we have the power to regulate the workers who make that product that gets sent across state lines. It's almost like a connect the dots type of thing. If they can connect the dots to an express power, it's an implied power, and they can do it. There's a lot of controversy with that as well. Some people say it needs to be really close, and it has to be a close connection. Other people say there can be multiple connections, connect the dots to get to it. But Congress really has used implied powers. They've used the Necessary and Proper Clause, the Interstate Commerce Clause, a bunch to do things that aren't specifically listed in the Constitution. That's all. If you have any questions, email me, let me know. Otherwise, have a good day.